Hello everybody and welcome to another Azio Arts live stream where we build something in Unreal Engine and other tools and I take you along for the ride. My name is THADDAEUS. I'm a digital and mixed media artist from New York City, and today we're going to be focusing on materials. So this is for those of you who are beginners with materials or texturing inside of Unreal Engine. I'm going to be taking you from the ground up and we're going to be making a lightsaber. So we're going to be taking a 3D model of a lightsaber, which I've got here in Unreal Engine, and we're going to be texturing it, and we're going to be building up our knowledge of materials and textures through this project. It's actually pretty good to use a lightsaber because there's only a few materials on it and they're metal and a little bit simpler. So I think it's a great opportunity to just get a little more nitty gritty with materials. And I hope those of you who are joining will enjoy your time and feel free to ask any questions as I'm working. Definitely down to stop and really go through things in even more detail. If you have anything that comes up as I'm working here, and just throw those in the chat. And those of you who are joining at the end of the stream, I'm going to be giving away one of you my full course package, which takes you through making materials and landscapes and stuff and making a film and animation with Unreal Engine. So if that's something that you're into, stay tuned until the end and I will be giving away one of those to some of you joining. And if you're finding this video later, no worries. I'm running a discount for the next few hours for the next 5 people that jump on the course. So let's jump into it. Here we go. This is my 3D model here of my lightsaber, and for those of you that might want to join and follow along later, I've linked the 3D model to the lightsaber below this video. I think it's like $30, not expensive. So this is a 3D model and I've brought it inside of Unreal Engine, and I'm going to switch over to lit mode because we're going to set up a really simple lighting scenario to make sure we can make our materials and it actually looks correct, because if there's no lighting you can't see what you're doing. So I'm going to come up here to the plus button and drop down, and I'm going to choose, there's a few different ways we could go about this. I think I'm going to go ahead with the HDRI backdrop here, and if you don't have that already enabled, it's a plugin, so you can come up to Windows or edit here, plugins, and then there's a HDR backdrop. And what that does is it uses an HDR image to light the environment, and you also can use it as a background. So that is what I'm going to be using, and I'm actually downloaded my own HDR because I wanted to go with the Star Wars theme. So I found a desert, and to use your own HDRs, you just have to jump over to this free site, which is called Polyhaven. You can download any of these free HDRs to help light your environments. And so I've downloaded this one, and I'm dragging it into my HDR backdrop that I have in my scene. Adjust the projection center. And the projection center is just like where the image is, where if you're like standing in the exact center, you know, where that position would be. So we'll just drag it over here somewhere, and I think I'm going to also drag in a directional light to mimic the sun. And we may change our lighting scenario as we're working just to test it in different lightings. And I'll just position it somewhere that looks similar to where the sun is in our environment. And I'll probably lower the intensity of this here. Okay, so now we have just a basic lighting situation set up. And again, we should probably, as we're working, test our materials in different lightings because we want it to look good in all different lighting scenarios, not just one. But we'll start with this for now and see where we get to. So I'm going to switch over to the folder I've made for materials, which you should do when you're building projects in Unreal Engine. It's a good idea to divide things in an organized way. So usually that means you'll have a material folder that you'll start with. So I've made this material folder and we're going to start making materials for the lightsaber. And I have a reference that I found here. And this is going to be what I'll use. Pretty simple. And so I'm going to right click in the empty space and choose material here. Or, yeah, we'll start with this one. So I'm going to type in M, which is short for master, which I'll talk about in a second, why I'm doing that. So M for master material, and then underscore, and then I'll call this, let's do the just main metal material first. So I'll just call it metal. Okay. And we will double click that material to open it. So the way Unreal Engine works, which is perhaps a bit curious if you haven't used, or if you're more familiar with like Maya or Blender or something like that, is that it has a system for using master materials and instances of those master materials. What a master material basically is it's it's where the logic for the material is housed. You can build really complicated materials. They can all be contained within one master material. Then you make an instance, which is like a reference, like a lighter weight version of that material that just points back to the master material and doesn't have any of that logic. So you'll just be able to change things in real time, adjust colors in your instanced materials, but it's really just all referencing back to your main master material. And that master material could have many instances. So we could have one metal master material, which we're going to do, and then many instanced materials, which we could then be like a blue one or a green one or a black one, but they're all based on the same material. And this is a way to save time, but it's also a way to save computing power, which is kind of why this system evolved the way it is, because it's from kind of the game industry. So I made this master material, and we can start building the logic for the material, and then we can start making instances of it. So I'm going to start with the base color here. This is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, this card here is just going to accept all the different stuff we put into it to tell the material how to look. And so one of those inputs is base color. So in order to just make a simple color that we can plug in, I can hold on the 3 key in my keyboard and click in the empty space. Okay. Why does that work? Well, everything in Unreal Engine is based around math in some way, of course, because it's C++, it's based on programming. So when I hold down 3, what I'm holding down is what's called a vector. And when you have a color, it's really just a red, green, and blue value in the computer. And so when I hold down 3, I'm saying make a parameter that has 3 inputs, which is basically a color. So I could also hold down 2 and make one that's 2, or hold down 1 and make a float, right? These are different types of data that could be plugged in. And when we have a material, it's 3 or 4 if you want to have an alpha. So if I hold down 4 and click, I'll get red, green, and blue plus an alpha channel. So I know it can be a little confusing if you're not familiar, but it's just think of it as numbers, and 3 numbers make up a color, and 1 number makes up a black and white value. So this will make more sense as I start applying it, but we have a color. So we've started with this vector, which is XYZ, or red, green, and blue. And if I pull off of this top output here and plug it into base color, that's going to be the color that plugs in and tells that material what color to be. So if I hit save, and then I drag that material onto the main metal, we now have a metal, or just have a black on, it's just a simple black color on it. So let's refine this a little bit more. So we have our color, and maybe I'll make it something like a gray so it's a little bit easier to see. Next, we have metallic. And metallic is an interesting value. When you have different types of materials, there's different types of physics for how the light reflects off of it and wraps around it. And metallic materials have a very different physics for how light interacts with them than a non-metallic material. So this is basically a switch. It's technically a 1 to 0 value. So you could technically have a 0.5 input, but realistically it's supposed to either be metal or not metal. So 0 or 1. And textures will kind of play with that. Will you have like, you know, dirt on top of it? Obviously the dirt is not metallic, but the underneath material is metallic. So you can have like a texture map that kind of maps it, but we'll get to texture maps in a minute. So we have this metallic, so I can hold on one on my keyboard and click to create a single number value and plug that into metallic. And we want it to be metal, right? So we'll just put 1 in that value, and now you can see I have a whitish metal. So let's keep going. Specular. Specular is like the reflected light off the object. And for the most part, I just usually leave this the way it is normally. If you hover over these pins, it'll tell you what they are by default. And it says, use the scale to current amount of specularity on, oh, I think my head is blocking it. Let me move. Current amount of specular or non-metallic surfaces, and is a value of 0 and 1 and default at 0.5. So you can just leave it like that for now, but if you ever wanted to change the color of the reflected light off an object, you could do that there. Next, we come to roughness. This is super important. So if we hold 1 and we click in the empty space to create a new float, a new single number value, and we plug it in to roughness, suddenly we see a huge difference. And that is because roughness is a value from 0 to 1. Very rough objects are like less shiny, when more and less rough objects are more shiny. Some software, instead of roughness, I'm blanking on the alternate term that is used. It'll come to me, but it's basically how shiny the object is. And right now I plugged in a number that's 0, which means it's 0 roughness, which means the most shiny it could possibly be. And if I put it at 1, it's a lot. It's like a rubber or something. It's like very rough. So we want this to be close to 0, or maybe like 0.1. So pretty shiny. We hit save. Now we have a pretty cool metallic looking material starting to take shape. The next few sections here I'm not going to dwell on at the moment because I want to come back to them, like emissive color. That's going to be how we make the glowing beam of the lightsaber. But now that we have covered the color, metallic, roughness, inputs on the material, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. But I'm going to be now introducing a texture, because when we look at this, it looks cool. It looks like really interesting, but it is also kind of perfect looking, and no object is kind of completely glossy or completely without smudges or scratch. Even if you polish something, it does have a little bit of unevenness to it. And that's where we can start to add more realism to our materials, is not by just using colors inputs here, but also textures. Textures can add an unevenness to these inputs. So let's add an uneven roughness texture. So I have downloaded some grunge maps, which are unevenness, and you can find those linked below this video. I think they're like $1. very cheap, but super useful. So I've downloaded a few of them here. And they're basically just black and white textures, black and white maps. With different types of unevenness. And these ones that I've linked below are also repeatable, so they can repeat across a surface infinitely. So let's take a look here and find one that makes sense. Maybe I could try one of these scratches. We may need to test them. Or actually maybe one of these fingerprinty looking ones. Let's see which one looks bad. We'll try this one. Okay, so to add a texture to a material, we just drag it in straight up. And then we can literally take the RGB and plug it into our inputs. Now, in the case of using a roughness map, roughness is really only a 0 to 1 value, right? So we can really only use a black and white map. So sometimes when you have a texture, you can just drag off the red, green, or blue channel and use that as your roughness map, because those are single, 0 to 1 values, or 0 to 1 red value, 0 to 1 blue, green. But you can also drag off the RGB value, which I think will be fine for us right now. So when we look at this, we see that it may have added some unevenness, but it also, it's not quite as strong as we would want. And so there's ways we can adjust that, and one of them is going to be, one of them could be replacing the texture. We're modifying it in Photoshop to have more contrast. But another is that we can do it inside the material. So now we're starting to add a little bit of more logic to the material, how the material works. So plugging out of the texture here, I'm going to create a lerp node. And lerp stands for linear interpolate. So what does this do? This blends between two values with an alpha. And if I use this black and white texture as an alpha, and if you're not familiar, an alpha is just a mask where white values that are closer to 1 are the most visible, and black values that are closer to 0 are the least visible. And so we're going to use this as a mask. Now we can plug this into roughness, and I can plug two numbers into the A and B value here. And what this is doing is it's using the texture as a mask to blend between these two values. Now we can actually set the maximum, like the most rough that the object is, and the least rough. And using these values, you can really fine tune those texture values. So if I wanted it to be, actually don't know which is which here. 1 and 0.5. It's a range between 0.5 and 1. And maybe this will be 0.2. Now we can start to see our roughness getting picked up here, because we're saying basically adjust this texture value to be between 0.2 and 1 using this texture here as an alpha. Does that make sense? So let's go ahead and hit save and see how this looks. You can see we're starting to get a lot more of a realistic looking material. I'm not quite liking how the lighting is looking on this. I feel like it's giving us this weird black shadow here, but we'll come back to it a little bit later. So I have this texture value for roughness. That's looking pretty good. And I can also do this for color. I can do this for any other values. We'll stick with this for now and talk about material instances. So if I close this master material, I go back to my material folder. If I take this master material and I duplicate it, by right-clicking and saying create a material instance, it's going to make a new material that references this master material as an instance. And so this will be mi, so for material instance at the beginning, and then metal. And I'll just call it metal 1 or 2, whatever. So now if we double click this, we see it's a lot simpler of an interface, and that's good. But we need some values that we can change here. So in order to expose values from the master material to the material instance, we double click on the master material here and come over to something that we want to expose, like these minimum and maximum roughness values. And we're going to right click on them and convert them to a parameter. And that means it'll be exposed in the instance. And I'll call this minimum roughness. And I'll convert this one as well and call it max roughness. Now if we hit save and we come over to the material instance, we can see those values are now exposed and we can change them in real time. So if I enable them, I can now mess with this material. But we still have to replace the material on the lightsaber itself with the instance in order for that to change. But once we've done that, we can see it in our viewport as well. And you can just drag them around, experiment, see, try to get a value that you like, hit save, and you're good to go. Now, the cool thing is, now that I've made one instance, I can make a new metal very easily. So I can come back to this metal, right click on it, create a new material instance, and I'll call it mi for material instance, and I'll call this one metal 3. I can, let's, use this for the black part here. So I'll drag it onto that. And now I have a second material instance that I can modify separately. For this one, I want to change the actual color of it. So I'm going to come back to my master material. And I'm going to turn the color into a parameter. So I'm going to right click on it, convert to parameter, and we'll call this just color. And the cool thing is, if we hit save, it will now have updated that new value, that new option in all of our other instances, whether it's the first one we made or the second one we made. It's now available in both of them. So this is a super efficient way of working. Okay, so I'm going to open the third metal that I made, and I'm going to enable the color, and I'll drag this down to make a darker metal. Hit save, and now we have the black, I guess they're like sort of heat sinks or something on the bottom. So that's pretty cool. Now we'll just make the center piece here. So we'll duplicate the instance, maybe the first one we made. Now it's a new instance. It's a new metal. We can drag it on. We can take this one and either keep it the same, or we can make it a little more rough or less rough. So we can very quickly create a lot of variation here. And I believe there's another material on here that's brass. So I'm going to, I believe it's on this side, the little button here is brass. So I'll duplicate the material again, drag it on. And this one I'll modify to be more golden, brassy. And for example, if we wanted to use this material here, but we, wanted to play with a different roughness texture, different texture input, that can also be added in the master material as a parameter. So if I open up the master material, I can come over to that texture that we dragged in, and I can right click on it and also convert to a parameter. And I can call it roughness texture and hit save. And now if I open that up, I have a new input here I could enable, and I could try coming back to my textures and trying a different grunge texture for just this instance. So I don't know, maybe something like this. Looks pretty cool. One final thing I'd like to modify here before we jump over to making the actual beam for the blade is this texture here. On this object, we're noticing that it's actually too big. Roughness texture looks pretty good, but it's a little bit too large. Might be hard to see through the live stream, but the texture for me feels a little video gamey or too large. And so I need to be able to modify that as well. So if we come back to our master material, in order to modify the placement of the texture on the surface, I'm going to right click and make a new node, which is going to be called coordinate. So texture coordinate. I type in coordinates and this will come up, texture coordinate. And this is basically like a map for where the texture should be on the surface. So if I drag off of that and I type in multiply, and I plug that into the UVs, what this allows me to do is make another float. So hold down 1 and click here and plug it in. Then like we did before, we're going to right click, convert it to a parameter, and we'll call this texture size. And what this is going to do is multiply the scale, the placement of the texture by this number. And by default, we'll make it 1. We'll hit save. And now we can jump back into any of our instances. I believe it's this one, or maybe this one. Let me not block it with my head. And we have our new value that we created here, texture size. So I'll enable it. And now when I drag that, you can see I'm able to modify the size of the repeating texture here. Super useful. So we can, it looks like the UVs are a little cut up here, so we're getting some slightly strange results, but normally it should work pretty well on, something with nicely laid out UVs. That's looking actually a lot better. Okay. Any questions so far? Feel free to drop them in the chat. So now that we've made our materials for the metallic objects, it is time to add our blade here. So I'm going to come over here, and this one is not a metal material, right? It's a completely different new type of material. So we're going to make a new master material. So I'll right click in the empty space, come over to material and type in M underscore, and we'll just call this blade. Double click it to open. And this one, we're going to actually be making it glowing. So we're going to be using this emissive color here. I'm going to hold down 3 to make a new float because we need to be able to modify the color of the lightsaber. We'll go ahead and right now convert it to a parameter because we know we're going to want to change that. And we're going to plug it into emissive color. But in between here, we want to also be able to control the brightness of the glow of the blade. So we're going to add a multiply in between, just like we did for the texture values, but in this case, it's going to be multiplying the color to kind of boost its brightness. So we'll make a new float, and we'll convert it to a parameter as well and call it brightness. and plug it in, and we'll make it 1 by default. And hit save. Okay, so now we can come over to this material, right click, convert it to a material instance, MI, then blade, and then drag it on to the blade. Now we can open the instance and start messing around with it. So I'm gonna open the color and we'll make it blue. And you'll notice that it's kind of flat, which is because we're modifying the emissive color of the object, which means it's kind of like a light or something that's glowing. It's gonna kind of lose a little bit of dimension, which is in this case exactly what we want for the lightsaber blade. I'll hit OK, and now I will start increasing the brightness. So we'll start pulling it and pulling it and pulling it and pulling it and pulling it, and it starts getting brighter and brighter and brighter. I'll put it at 500 for now. Okay, so now we come to the interesting feature of lightsabers, which is that they wouldn't look how they look without bloom. So I'm going to open up my post-processing volume, and I'm going to scroll down to bloom here, and I'm going to switch it on, and I'm going to switch on intensity, and right away we're seeing a lot more of a lightsaber look because that kind of glow around the blade of the lightsaber is only happening because it's actually just like mostly a whitish, bright white kind of beam, and it's so bright that when a camera captures it, it has a bloom effect that has this color kind of wave off of it. So if you saw a lightsaber in real life, it would probably not look the same as it does in the movies, which is kind of an interesting fact. It would probably look more just like a whitish, maybe have a little bit of color to it, but more be like kind of like a whitish beam. So this is looking pretty good. It's making my lens flares go crazy. So I'm going to come over to my flares section, I'll type in flare, and I'll turn off my lens flares because they're just too much. And there you have it. It's pretty good here. I can always come back to my bloom and adjust the bloom of the blade itself here, depending on how intense I want it to be. It will be like how intense that color kind of fading off of it is. And let's try it in a darker environment as well. So we'll come over to our HDR backdrop here. Let's try a different HDR background. Actually, I'll come over here. I'll download a new one. We'll download one from Polyhaven. Let's find something that's on the darker side. We'll find somewhere indoors. Let's see. Maybe this inside of this castle cellar. So let's click on it, hit download, and now I'll just come to my downloads and drag it into Unreal Engine. It's really that easy. Now I can drag it in. Oh, looks like it's not coming in the right kind of texture, which happens sometimes. What I need is the EXR, so I'll come back over here to the website and download an EXR instead of an HDR. That's what I want. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the reverse. I want an HDR, not an EXR. So this is just file type differences. Unreal Engine seems to work better with HDR images instead of EXR images as HDRs. So just, I don't know, FYI, I feel like I've run into that before. So if I drag in the HDR version of the same file, let me just delete it first. Castle HDR, let's drag it in. There we go. That looks more correct. Then I can drag it straight into my backdrop and it will switch. And this one I'll lower the directional light. Cool. And with this new lighting scenario, we could go ahead and open the materials again, modify them. Like this, to me, is looking a little bit not shiny enough. So I'll open it up and then I'll modify the roughness. There we go. Okay, so drop in the chat if you have any questions so far. We're almost at the end here. I just want to make sure I answer any questions that we had on these basic material functions. If you have any. While I modify this. Drop it in the chat there. I feel like I should make sound effects as I'm working here. Looks pretty good. And this kind of emissive effect here could be adjusted pretty easily to do like a button here that's glowing. You would just have it not be quite as strong. So if we come over here to the blade, duplicate it, and drag it onto the button here, we could very easily come over here and just, I don't know, make an orange button, let's say, and just kind of lower the brightness down here till it's more of just like a faint glow, depending on how bright you want it to be. So a lot of versatility there with the emissive textures. Okay, so I think I'm gonna come into the end here. Feel free, if you're finding this video later, to drop any questions that come to you as you're watching in the chat below. And I'm about to do a giveaway for whoever's still here. And I know Guilliam has also already gotten on the course. So sorry, you're disqualified unless you want me to give it to you twice. So if you are still here and you want to be entered into the giveaway, which is totally fine. If you're not, just put a fire emoji in the chat right now as I just talk through really briefly what I'm going to be giving away to you. But I am just going to bring it up here. So just drop those emojis in the chat. So what I'm giving away here, and Gilliam, I'm very excited for you to jump into this. Gilliam won the giveaway last stream, who's joining me here live. But if there's any rest of you who are finding this video later, I'm just going to really quickly run through what this is. Unreal Engine Filmmaker is my collection of online courses and materials that I built around empowering you to make your first film or animation using Unreal Engine. And I'm really trying to take you from zero, or like not knowing that much about, maybe you know one particular area, one particular part of the process. So taking you from there, from being kind of a beginner to making a finished film in under 30 days. That's the goal of the course package that's what I'm doing. And I developed this by doing this myself. I have made many films throughout the years, but this one was the first one that I'd made myself as a single artist with only Unreal Engine. So it was kind of mind-blowing to me, and it started me down this path of wanting to help other people do the same and be able to build their own projects in Unreal Engine as well. So this film I built, like I said, in under 30 days. It was like a photorealistic environment. I used weather effects. I animated all the cameras using an iPad. I used animation and mixed it and edited it in Unreal Engine, and then just did a little bit later after export. So this is the goal for me, to get you from knowing not that much at all to being able to build your own project yourself. And the way I get you there is very intentional and specific. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to like just talk your ear off with stuff that's not really helpful. So I've designed this curriculum basically to really try to get you there as quick as possible. It's kind of, I wouldn't say a shortcut because there are no shortcuts, but it's kind of like me showing you the way, the path, the quickest path to the goal. And I've developed this, over months and months and months of trying to really condense it into the best format I can. So we start with an intro to Unreal Engine just in case you need that, but some of you might be past that if you're watching this video. And we start with the World Builder course, which is a full online course in its own right, which takes you through a lot of the stuff that we were doing in this stream. So like setting up materials, building levels, building an entire, basically take you through building a hyper-real desert environment similar to the one I made for my film. And I take you through that full process. You're going to get very comfortable by the end of it with like building worlds, not just desert environments, any sort of natural environments or not natural. Then we jump into the Lighters guide, which is a resource that I built for you to, kind of, because I was very lost when I was approaching lighting for the first time as a 3D artist. There wasn't a lot of training specifically for 3D artists, for people that use the computer, because it's very different than somebody out in the real world. Yes, we use the same principles, but like you technically could have like 500 lights, but should you? So this booklet helps answer some of those questions, helps give you some tools for how to approach lighting as a beginner. Then we come to the Virtual Filmmaker, which is its full course in its own, which takes you through animation, setting up cameras, the filmmaking process, what are like close, medium, wide shots, what are camera movement, how to do it, and we cover some basic animation as well. And then I also teach you how to edit in DaVinci Resolve, which is a free, extremely powerful editing tool. So I get you going on that. So there's that. And then I have a bonus for those of you who pick this up. That's a virtual filmmaking masterclass where I take you through this whole process. If you've taken my free training, it's basically that, but more detailed. And then finally, I've also added the bonus of the Weather Effects Wizard, which is my course on weather effects, just because I really enjoy it. And I feel like it can add a lot of dynamism and excitement to your films to have those rain, wind, snow, dust, storms being part of it. And then finally, I offer a video review for your project once you've completed it, or as you're completing it, you need feedback or help, you just can send it to me and I'll give you a personalized video review of that. So, a lot of students have taken this course and really received a lot from it, which is why I feel confident kind of offering it to you and suggesting that you consider it for your own enrichment. But you can always just check out the reviews on Trustpilot if you're unsure, but they're all 5 stars so far, and people have really just gotten a lot out of the course, which it's like probably the most, the best for me to see that. That's really encouraging, because that's what I want. I want you guys to be able to make the best possible films and animation, make your projects that is your own artistic vision, kind of empower you to do that. That's what I care about. So it's a lot of value. It's Unreal Engine guide, it's $27. World Builder course, $297 value. Bonus, which is the beginner's guide to lighting, which is $30 value. Virtual Filmmaker, which is $285 value. Filmmaking Masterclass, film in 30 minutes, is a $50 value, and the Weather Effects Wizard course is $119 value, and then the video feedback with me, a value at around $200. So it's a lot of value packed into this course package, and so I'm very excited to not charge you $1,000 for it, but instead $299. So $499 is the full price, but for the next 5 of you that see this YouTube video and want to jump on the discount for the next 8 hours, I'm offering 40% off, so it's down at $299. So if that's something that you're into, jump on that, and I'd be excited to learn with you. All right, that's my whole spiel. Thank you, those of you who joined this live stream. I hope you got a lot out of it. On materials, we're going to be doing these live streams every Friday at 3 p.m. EDT time. So we cover all kinds of topics, from beginner stuff like materials and textures like this one, and also more advanced stuff like how to build actual finished shots for films. Cover all that in the live streams. So join us on the next one, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. See you later.